Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, and we have several Ole Miss fans that kind of want to react to what they have seen this football season and in this Gator Bowl. We call this the Reaction Roundtable, kind of getting the perspective of different fans at one time, just to kind of put the football season to bed. And Ole Miss was far more successful in the postseason than your average run-of-the-mill SEC team, who most every one of them spent their time being disappointing. Ole Miss was kind of the flag bearer for the conference in the Gator Bowl against Duke, and that was pretty fantastic. So let's go to the Reaction Roundtable and see what's up. We have Josh Guest, who is from the Commodore Media Group and Q105. You have Dids over there as well, and you have Dalen Flowers joining us. Three different perspectives of what was an interesting football season, to say the least. You know, we're going to start with you, Josh, because we haven't talked to you in a while. What is your impression coming out of that Gator Bowl, thinking about the season as a whole? You're muted, by the way, I think. Okay, well, same question to you, Dalen. Go ahead.
Man, I mean, it's good to end on a high note, obviously. Another double-digit win season, but obviously a little disappointing. And, I've kind of been talking to family over the last couple of days, and I've just kind of been saying, look, I hope 2024 was just a learning experience for Lane Kiffin. I hope everything that went on this season throughout the inside of the program, the way we played on the field, how things were held in terms of the coaching staff, I just hope everything was a learning experience for him this year with this program, and that it does not happen again. And, we don't ask for perfection, but it's like the little things that we saw this year, the things that can be slightly tweaked, that can be promoted better in a way that hopefully moves us into a stance where we're talking about a team that can make and dominate the playoffs, essentially, that hopefully moving forward, we don't have to be in the hypothetical conversation anymore. We're actually playing throughout this time of the year currently.
Dids, it was really interesting because this Ole Miss team, they had some bad losses. There's some inexcusable losses. But when this team played its best, it was potentially the best football team in the country. The problem is they couldn't play their best on a consistent basis.
Yeah. I think our best is as good or better than anybody in the entire country, just like you said. The problem with us is we didn't show up Saturday after Saturday, mainly against the lower competition, right? You got Kentucky, Florida, I know that's a road game, LSU, whatever. You go to Baton Rouge and lose that one. A lot of people lose in Death Valley. But yeah, I think Dalen put it pretty well there. Hopefully you take this season, you're not looking back thinking about hypotheticals of what could have been, if you would have done this, what could this team possibly have achieved? And, you kind of look at the way the playoffs have, kind of transpired so far, the way these games are going, and you would really like Ole Miss's chances if they were able to get into it. But they didn't do what needed to be done to be one of those 12 teams, right? And that's obviously really disappointing. Hopefully they're able to learn from that going into next year and, not lose those types of games like we did this past year, get into that 12-team playoff and make a little bit of noise.
Now, Josh, are you here this time? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yes, I've got you fine. All right, so after the Gator Bowl game, after seeing what happened, what is your opinion on that game and the season as a whole? Kind of the season and the program.
Well, Stephen, as you said, we were the flag bearer for the SEC. It was kind of disappointing with Alabama and South Carolina and us kind of in that discussion of do we belong, do we not? And then they lay like absolute eggs and duds. Ole Miss did not do that. We did what we were supposed to do and won big. Actually, what I was trying to say, and I missed what Dalen said because I was trying to fix my mic, was that, what might have been. And I think Diz was saying, don't go back and say, what might have been. But what might have been, because this collection of talent is was phenomenal. And so, it was a good game. Ole Miss did what they were supposed to do. But the SEC as a whole kind of hurt themselves on any kind of argument about the conference as a whole, in my opinion, especially with what Notre Dame did to Georgia. That was kind of disappointing to me.
Yeah, Georgia did have a backup quarterback.
True.
Yeah.
So we have to look at that. But the SEC is down. Probably the best team in the SEC lost 3 games, and they played in the Gator Bowl. That is the what might have been question. As far as the team with the highest ceiling, it showed out to be somebody else. But let's talk about that Gator Bowl real quick, Dalen. Jaxson Dart, listen, I've been impressed by what he's done for the better part of 3 years. I walked out of that game with my jaw on the floor. It was absolutely spectacular what he did. He went from not being on draft boards to being like 3rd on draft boards by playing in a bowl game. So take note, seniors looking to play in a bowl game. This is what you can do. And Jaxson Dart used that to perfection.
Yeah, and I think it builds a piece of beacon that we play one of the top defenses in the country. I know Manny Diaz has had a fantastic year his first year at Duke, and he's consistently brought in, whether a coordinator or a head coach, some of the top defenses in the country. And so I think that helped tremendously, like you said, and like Did said, man. You look back and we weren't consistently as great as this team could have been every Saturday. But I thought Jaxson Dart showed ample opportunities to be better every single weekend as well. And like I saw from 2022 to 2023, the great jump that he had. And even from last year to this year, the great jump he had. Look, when he's playing on all cylinders, and that's evading the pocket, rolling out of the pocket and using his legs and his arms effectively. That's when he has the deep ball on point. There may not be a better quarterback that has a better deep ball in this draft class than him. I think he's continued to improve with his progressions, and I think if he can continue to do that, then he will be a very good NFL talent one day. But like you said, I think that's a great point. Regardless of the glitz and the glamour, Jaxson Dart went out there for the love of his school. And, throughout the transfer portal and the way the state of college football is, you don't find that a lot too much anymore. You don't find a quarterback or a player in general that's at a school for three plus years now. And Dart came in when he was kind of unknown, and Ole Miss was kind of in a mode where Matt Corral and that team was gone. So who was the next guy to step up? So I'm proud of the kid, and for him to come back the way the Florida game ended for himself, and come out there in the Egg Bowl and the Gator Bowl as well, and just put on a show. And like you said, kind of just cement himself in terms of everyone's talking about Shedeur Sanders, everyone's talking about Cam Moore, but you guys need to be talking about Jaxson Dart as well. That was really just kind of uplifting for me, for him to go through what he's gone through over the last parts of the season, and injuries as well, and to still come out there and play that game. It was really inspiring to see not only his ability, but how much heart he has as a quarterback. And I think that that alone will, as a general manager or owner, if I'm an NFL general manager or owner, I'm looking at his heart and his leadership alone and saying, maybe I need to add this guy to my quarterback room.
Yeah, looking at this, you're going to have all of the armchair analysts break down the quarterback class for the next 4 months. And they're going to think about Cam Moore because of his measurables and his arms and all of his analytics. Think Anthony Richardson along the way, those type guys that are just going to be combine monsters. Then you have Shedeur Sanders, who is the best quarterback in the country. Just ask him. Yeah, it's one of those situations to where he plays very well. And Jaxson Dart just has the ability to grow over the course of this Senior Bowl. The most important college game that he has played is coming up in 2 weeks in Mobile, Alabama. And if he can take that momentum into pro day, into the combine, all of a sudden you're looking at a first day pick potentially.
Yeah. You talked about the Senior Bowl coming up and him playing in it. One thing's really going to benefit Jaxson is he's going to be around all of these NFL GMs, NFL coaches, being coached by NFL coaches that are currently in the league right now. They're going to be able to see the intangibles, the leadership, like Dalen talked about. That's one thing that Jaxson has in droves, right? And you saw it with this Ole Miss team. You alluded to it earlier, Stephen, all the opt-outs you see across college football. And look, I was as skeptical as anybody going into the Gator Bowl of, people talking about Cam Ward and him sitting out the second half of his bowl game because of his draft status and all that. Ole Miss had all of these players with Jackson, Jordan Watkins, Nolan, Princely, Ivy, all of those guys. It seemed like they all followed Jackson's lead from that that point forward. Lane tried to take him out, and he said, "No, I'm not done here. I'm going to play one more drive," right? And he went out there and he played another drive, threw another touchdown pass. So that's one thing that all of these NFL GMs, NFL scouts, NFL coaches are going to get to see at the Senior Bowl, the intangibles that you're not able to see day in and day out just by watching film. He's a great leader. He gets the most out of his teammates, right? And we've seen that throughout 3 years here in Oxford, and I know they're going to see the same things here in a couple of weeks in Birmingham.
All right, so when we come back, we will talk about the momentum that Ole Miss is going to have going into the 2025 season, the hope in the future that is Austin Simmons. He has a chance to be an amazing, amazing quarterback. And we will also look at some of the other things that are going on around the college football scene right now. So stick around for that. You know, from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, the same game parlays, and so much more. Well, for instance, Ohio State is currently a 5.5-point favorite over Texas, and Notre Dame is just a 1.5-point favorite over Penn State and what should be some pretty good college football playoff semifinals. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Josh. All right, so we talked about this. This was the last game for Jaxson Dart. And this is the question that people outside the fan base is going to have. And this is from C. Rogers. He said, now that Ole Miss will lose a 3-year starter and a future NFL quarterback, even if the talent is better, the record likely won't be. And that is absolutely true. That nobody is going to walk into next season expecting Ole Miss to do what they expected Ole Miss to do this season. So, Josh, would you be happy with just a fringe chance like, for say, LSU had going into this season, or like what, honestly, Tennessee or Oklahoma had going into the season, if you want to look at 3 different paths that the season could happen? Would that be a 2025 that would be acceptable to you?
I think without the drive at Georgia, yes. But we saw what Simmons could do, what he could be. And I know that the team is more than just a quarterback, but he also seems to have a lot of intangibles. He seems to be he seems to be the kind of leader that they want to follow just from the outside looking in. And I'm not close to it. I don't have any inside information, but just from the things I see, the way he interacts with his teammates, both when they show him on the sideline and when he's on the field, he seems to have, and I don't want to compare him to Dart. That's not fair. They're different people, different quarterbacks, different leaders, but he has a lot of those same things, in my opinion, those traits that lend themselves well to being a quarterback, even if he's quote unquote in the spotlight, or if the spotlight's on him, his teammates still may want to play for him. But I also think he's going to put the spotlight on others. I think he's that kind of kid and that kind of player, and I think it's going to be pretty fun to watch. So all in all, I'm going to say no. I want my expectations a little higher to be acceptable. How about that?
Okay. What are you looking at 2025? Now, granted, half of the transfer portal class is still yet to be recruited. I mean, so this roster could look a whole lot different. And there's rumors out there in the fan base that Juice Wells could return. That is a name to pay attention to. I don't know exactly where that stands, but you have that wide receiver unit probably better, honestly, than it was this season with an injured Trey Harris and a Jordan Watkins that was really, really good. But whenever you have like a Caleb Cunningham, a Caleb Odom, a Deshaun Stribling, a Juice Wells at wide receiver, you have a unit that is pretty good. And the tight ends right now, Luke Haas and Daquan Wright, top shelf. I can see what you're saying, Josh. So, Dalen, what is your opinion on what this offense could be in 2025?
Like I said, I hope 2024 was a learning experience, and I think when you come back to the running back room, I think that's a huge key. I think that a Lane Kiffin offense, you think from the outside perspective, pass, And not necessarily is what he's done at Ole Miss been that situation. Even at Alabama, even in Florida when he was at FIU, was that the situation. A Lane Kiffin offense effectively moves when they have a competitive and an effective run game. I think with Logan Diggs showing just a little bit of what he can do in the Gator Bowl, I think he still has a little bit more of upside to show as well. We'll see Chicago tonight as well and see what he will be able to do. And I expect us to fully go get another transfer portal running back as well, to see just to kind of fill out their room, just to not only give more competition but have more experience. I think that running back room is something that needs to be talked about after what happened in 2024 for Ole Miss. And I think effectively, can we get guys back there that can help the offense move freely, that can protect, Austin Simmons as well. I think a running back is just as big as a pass blocker as a tight end or the offensive line is, and that's something that's huge for a running back room as well. So I think the running back room is something that just needs to be ampled and talked about really heavily in the offseason. How can we improve from what we saw in 2024 to what we can be in that running back room to help Austin Simmons be better, to help the wide receivers have more opportunities, to help the tight ends and the offensive line have more one-on-one opportunities to be better and allow the offense to flow more free, so we can see what we've saw from Austin Simmons so far this season, and which is, if he can do what he's done consistently, man, literally the sky's the limit for the kid. Like I genuinely will sit back and watch the kid, and this is not just me being an Ole Miss fan. I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. Just the way how effortlessly he throws the ball, how he sets his feet, the way his head is on his shoulders already for the age he is. It's out of this world, honestly. And I think if we can just get the offense around him that he needs to be him, I think they're like Josh said. I don't know if a rebuild year or kind of a slump year is honestly the expectations going in. And I know that may be saying a lot, like he said, like a 3-year quarterback, a new quarterback, and kind of a new system. But I think with the expectations that we have and the way that honestly in the transfer portal you can kind of revitalize the team, for the good or the bad, I think that expectations should still be high going forward.
Yeah, the one problem, Dids, that we have is there's not a Walter Nolan in the transfer portal right now. There's not a Princely Amon Mielen in the transfer portal right now. So you're playing with a little bit of different hand and trying to build the defense up differently. That's the reason 2024 was such an opportunity, because you got these first day NFL draft picks on your team. It's going to be more difficult, and honestly, the team has to be more balanced in 2025, don't you think?
Well, yeah, but also I think this is where you need to give credit to this coaching staff, because I think maybe they looked ahead and foresaw this coming, that you're not going to have these big-time players entering at the rate that they were previously. That's when you went out and you got Will Eccles, you got Cam Franklin, you've got Xavier Harris on your team, right? We've got guys coming back, young guys that weren't starters, but still played a good bit, right? Harris was a monster inside for us there whenever he got in. Franklin and Eccles both performed well whenever they got in on that defensive line, right? So we've got guys that can come in and can, hopefully take over for the Ivies, the Gees, Nolans, Princely's. Obviously, we've got Princely's brother, Prince Will, coming in as well through the transfer portal. A very high success rate when it comes to rushing the passer. The stats don't bear it, but the analytics do when it comes to Prince Will. So he's a very talented, very gifted pass rusher. And one thing you've been able to see from Randall Joyner, Pete Golding, this entire defensive coaching staff, they're able to get the most out of their defensive linemen. So I'm very optimistic that these young guys are going to grow after having a year in the SEC, in this system, and be able to come out and perform, maybe not quite to the level of Nolan and those guys did, obviously, because that was one of the best defensive lines we've ever seen in Oxford, but certainly enough to hold their own, to wreak a little bit of havoc there, and to, keep this defense moving in the right direction. I think we got to get, a little better on the back end. I know we're working on that in the portal. Already got a couple guys in. But look, I'm going to trust Golding and these guys. They've done a really good job, not only on the defensive line, but offensive line the past couple of years in the high school recruiting circuit to try to build some depth there and try to develop guys. And hopefully we see that bear out here in 2025.
All right, guys, I'm going to nerd out here for a second, so just bear with me. All right. the recruitment of Caleb Odom is a massive, massive recruitment. And it's not just because he's a great player, because he is. It's because what he allows you to do. Let me explain.
Mhm.
On the field, just a normal personnel doing normal 12 personnel things, Luke Haas and Daquan Wright, which that was a main formation during the bowl game with Caden Prescorn and Daquan Wright. That's something they did. Now, if you add Caleb Odom to that, that's essentially 3 tight ends on the field at one time. You want your running game to get better? Do you want to switch out of a running offense and a passing offense and running what you normally do at tempo without having to substitute? This allows you to do this. This takes Ole Miss's offense to the next level. And as a proponent of 12 personnel, I've always been a proponent of 12 personnel. I love 12 personnel. 13 personnel just has me giddy, Josh.
Yeah, Stephen. I mean, I can imagine, go from 12 to 30. If they had if we would do 4 tight ends, you'd probably even be giddier. I don't know. Who knows?
Stop it.
I know.
This is a PG podcast.
Hey, but speaking of Daquan Wright, how sick was the throw from Dart on the TD to Daquan? I mean, the toughness he showed you. Y'all spoke about it earlier. But the toughness he showed, and there were 2 passes that were just absolute dimes that he threw. That was one of them. And so I can't say enough about that.
Daquan had a star turn in that game. As good as Jaxson Dart was, Daquan understated had a star turn in that game.
That was his Caden Prescorn Peach Bowl this year. That was the exact replica of what Caden Prescorn did in the Peach Bowl last year.
I do feel bad for that poor photographer that he ran over in the end zone on his touchdown. I think that guy had to go get x-rays. I didn't hear what happened, but I mean, Daquan took 2 people out. I mean, that pass was a dime. That was one of the best passes I've ever seen Jaxson Dart throw, and that was until later on when he threw that crazy pass to Jordan Watkins.
Yeah, rolling out to the left there.
So, anyway, when we come back, we will talk about the basketball game. You can be pretty excited about that, so stick around. There's nothing like being at a live game, the roar of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers squeaking on the court, and even spotting a few celebrities in the stands. I remember going to an NBA game a few years back, and the electricity was absolutely unforgettable. I think it was the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. It wasn't even 2 good teams at that point, and it was awesome. This year, I'm looking forward to go catching more games at the arena, and Game Time makes it easier than ever with the new Game Time Picks feature. Whether it's basketball, concerts, or theater, Game Time helps you find the best deals on great seats without the hassle of endless scrolling. I just hopped on the app to check out tickets for an upcoming game, and the Game Time Picks feature made it a breeze to find a super deal on amazing seats. And plus, the app showed me a panoramic seat view so I could pick the perfect spots. No guesswork, no surprises. And it's not just sports. Game Time also has incredible deals for concerts and comedy shows. I'm planning to go see Midland in February. So they helped me get tickets for that concert next month. And with all in prices, I get to see exactly what I would pay up front. No hidden fees at checkout. What I love most about Game Time is their lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And with event cancellation protection, your tickets are covered. If your plans change, it's the most flexible ticketing app I've ever used. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off that first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the basketball game. Ole Miss was able to take down the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday. That was a big win because at this point, I've talked with Tim Thomas about it. It's a race to 8 conference wins for Ole Miss, and honestly, every other conference as good as it is. And Ole Miss in the first half did not play well. For instance, Dre Davis had kind of a shocker in the first half of that game. But in the second half, the first 10 minutes of it, they got going and just suffocated Georgia. They had a little bit of lull in the second half, allowed Georgia to get close again, but was able to stretch it back out, and they eventually won by 12 points. Dalen, Were you at that game?
No, but I watched every single second very, very, very precisely. Look, I'm first of all, I'll say this: ugly win is better than a pretty loss. That'll be my first takeaway. But secondly, is I just think we have to rely on Jamin Brakefield, and when I say this, I mean he is going to be an essential part on whether Steven just said whether we win 8 conference games or not. He struggled really bad in the first half, but in the second half, I don't know what Chris Beard said in the halftime speech. I watched a completely different Jamin Brakefield, and he's essential to this team. He comes out to the bench. He provides points in the post. He provides points in the mid range. We rely him a lot on the pick and roll action at the top of the key. We rely him a lot in the post and the defense as well, and defensive rebounds. He plays an essential part to this team that, from an outside perspective looking in, or you just look at the box scores, you would think, oh, he's not a vital part of this team, but he is, and he's so essential to this team. And him as well as Matthew Morelli combined for 30 points. I think they are two of the most important players on this team, in my opinion. And so I think they will be key in us moving forward. And you brought up a great point. It's kind of like this in football this year. This is literally the most competitive conference in the entire country this year. And there's literally any given night, any team can beat another team. And I don't care if it's number 1 Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Bama. Every single team, in my own personal opinion, can compete with other teams. I think Missouri can compete with some of the best as well, even though they have had a rough season last year and are not currently ranked. But like any team, in my opinion, this conference can win. So like we said, Ole Miss is really going to have to pick up on their keys. I think Chris Beard got a great perspective of what needed to be worked on better in the second half. We just got to make shots, and we got to play our own game. We got too compulsive in the first half, and I think we tried to avoid what Georgia is great at instead of playing our own basketball game. And I think if we can just play what we do great, I think we'll be just fine moving forward. But it was a great learning process, a great way to kind of adjust and see what we need to work on the first conference game. And now we move forward to John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks, which will be a tough game in a very tough environment as well.
Yeah, and you look at this Georgia game, Ole Miss actually out-rebounded Georgia. And rebounding has been the bad spot for this Ole Miss basketball team. Them winning games on the board, if they can out-rebound you, you're not going to win the game.
Yeah, that's the Achilles heel for this basketball team. And, kind of piggybacking off of what Dalen said there about the game, that was the difference in the second half. I didn't see a whole lot of difference in the first half we played and the second half we played, outside of the fact that we out-rebounded them by, 8 or 9 in the second half, whatever it was. That kept Georgia off the offensive boards, kept the second chance points at a minimum, even though we still lost that category. But what we were able to do, we were able to get out into transition, get that offense going. Didn't always lead the points, but it did keep Georgia's defense a little more off balance, didn't let them get into their sets, and we were able to take advantage of that. Brakefield obviously played a really good second half. I agree with Dalen. He is a key to this team. The biggest part with Brakefield is staying under control. Sometimes he seems to get a little too over anxious, a little too overzealous, trying to get to the basket, trying to dribble a little bit too much. Play within the offense, take the shots that come to him, because he's an incredibly big, athletic guy that can put the ball in the basket, as long as he's not having to create it for himself. I think Morrell played a really good game, a really efficient game. He drove to the basket. That's one thing that I wanted to see more out of him this year. He seemed to start settling for too many outside shots at the beginning of the year. He started to drive to the basket, and then tons of credit to Chris Beard. He kind of took a more animated role here in this game, really stayed on the officials. I think Georgia had 2 or 3 fouls in the first half, and Chris Beard was on top of them every single time going into the second half. They ended up calling 11 fouls on Georgia to our 4 or 5, and that was another reason we were able to jump out to a lead. And when you play defense like Chris Beard wants you to play defense, which is what we did in the second half, that's going to be really tough to overcome once we out-rebound you like we did there in the second half. That's the key. We go to Arkansas, like Dalen said. This is a good time to catch Arkansas, too. We've seen John Calipari teams in the past, right? Memphis, Kentucky. We've been watching him for a while. It's full of young kids that haven't played a lot of college basketball. They're not quite ready for this stage yet. They're still kind of learning the game, learning the league in particular. They haven't played in the SEC outside of their opener this past Saturday. If you're going to get an Arkansas team, you want them, or a John Calipari team, you want them early in the season as opposed to later once they start figuring things out.
All right, Josh, what was your impressions from the game?
Stephen, this is the one I actually went to. They do promotions over the holidays here, and we live here, so I went to it. And at one point, Beard jerked Dia around and spun him towards him and was getting all over him. And then he went to the bench. He knelt down in front of him and he coached him up while the team was playing the next 30 seconds or so. Really, really enjoyed seeing that. And by the way, at halftime, the Bill Street Flippers performed. If you don't know who they are, look them up and find them. That was awesome. And after the game, was watching another SEC game on TV, and they came up and said the 16 hardest schedules in the country are the 16 SEC teams in basketball. How crazy is that? 1 through 16 is all SEC. But early it was Morrell. Morrell was early. Late it was Brakefield. He even hit a 3 near the end of the shot clock when we needed it. When they were making that run in the second half, and Brakefield. Beard talked about it after the game. His heart was in the right place. He didn't necessarily have the best game here. Nor Morrell had the best game, but their heart's in the right place. And he said they basically took this team on their shoulders and said, "We're not losing at home. We're not losing this game." And so it was really good to see. But I thought every time we needed a spark in the second half, Brakefield did something to create that spark after a not so good first half. But he did just fine in the second half, and really it propelled us to that 12-point win. So and on a night that Juju Murray just couldn't shoot the ball. So
yeah, a lot of people had trouble shooting the ball, especially Georgia. Georgia was less than 30% from the game from all field goals, and they were only 2 of 18 from 3-point range as well. So it was pretty interesting indeed. Josh Guest from the Commodore Media Group, Dalen Flowers from the Rebel Walk, Derek Vandy Griff, Dids from Ole Miss After Dark, joining us for their perspectives on Ole Miss athletics. Do want to thank everybody for tuning in. We are going to have Dalen again tomorrow night. We will have him on the show a little bit more pronounced. Tuesday, we're going to have Mike Huseman talking transfer portal. He's Mr. Transfer Portal. Wednesday, Keon Young is going to be on the show Wednesday night. Thursday will be the SEC Squad show. Friday, we'll have Tim Thomas. Saturday, we'll have Tom Vanderford. And I think Sunday, we're going to check. I haven't confirmed it or not, but we're going to try and get somebody like Michael Katz to handle this Sunday show before we do the live show here. I want to continue the live shows up into my surgery, kind of damn the views. I just want to kind of do that just to build the basketball base before we go under the knife for the surgery. Anyway, I want to thank all of our guests that came on tonight. You'll be seeing them again as you always do, but thank y'all very much. And we will talk to y'all later.
All right, buddy. Howdy, Toddy.
Howdy, Toddy.